So I said the mornings were about higher kata. And I do want to hit the high points as whatever kata requests I get from you guys in terms of higher kata. John has already told me he wants some Goshin Jutsu. Andre has mentioned San kata. Jack has said knee kata. Any other higher kata?
Let's see what we got.
Let's look at Young Kata.
Just do a little bit of everything.
I have a question based on that.
Sure.
Funny comment.
Sure.
Koryu Dai Ichi.
Yeah. Right.
Where are all the overlaps, the duplicates, and why are the duplicates in the various kata? You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
Like Ichi, Ichi has that section that's also in Yan, I think.
And in
Go
Go,
is
you have the
Japanese.
same thing in Yan and Go.
Right, and I'm just curious as to why those things.
They were all built by different people at different times, and I think you saw evolving ideas. The higher kata that was Tomiki's own higher kata was San kata. And so that was his own piece. When he talked about higher kata, he was saying San kata, because that's what he did. Other of his compatriots at the time were building these other katas that later came to be numbered and used for various purposes. But yeah, there was the inclusion of pieces that were sort of tracked across time, probably by the same author. I would say Oba is largely responsible for most of the higher kata that we see out there. And the fact that you see it in Go and in Yan and in Ichi, particularly the Irimi Nagi parts is what you're talking about, makes me think that's probably all his work, and he just particularly liked that set. I'm not sure if there's any other rationale beyond that. He just likes doing those. And
These are fun, we're going to do them.
Right, and as they were being created, there probably was not a sense that they were going to be long-term artifacts, that they were going to be, the set pieces. The San kata was sort of taking the preeminence of being a set piece. That was the repository for everything that wasn't going on in Randori Aikido, which is how Tomiki was thinking about it at the time. And that was like all the rest of the stuff, right? All the leftovers, all the old style stuff that didn't quite fit into Randori per se, was going into these other kata sets as preservation mode things, perhaps. Later, they got used for promotion purposes. And okay, well, you're going to need Shodan, and you need to learn this. And Nidan, you need to learn this and that. And they're still very useful for educational purposes. But why? I don't know. Okay. I don't know why those repetitions are happening like that. It's a good question. I will think about it some. Anybody have a theory?
Were they all exactly the same, or were they slight variants of each?
Well, sometimes you see variants. So there is like a form of being grabbed from behind the back and doing kotegaeshi, for instance.
Yes.
It crops up in Nikata. And then you see it show up again in Yan kata, but it's different. It's executed differently.
Okay.
But when you look at the ones happening in Ichi kata, there's slight differences in the entrance, but the throws themselves are pretty much the same.
Okay.
When you look at Yan versus Go, you see a little differences in that Go is trying to emphasize a steady acceleration. So they're happening, that this one's getting a little quicker from this one, quicker from that one, quicker from that one, all the way through, starting from slow to going fast. And in Yan kata, the emphasis is not particularly on that acceleration, but is rather on sort of just working with rise and fall, which is near and dear to what we're messing with this week. But it's, so there are differences in emphasis in the different katas, and there are differences in entry sometimes, but mostly the execution is the same. Occasionally there's some. You were going to say something?
I was thinking of the katas that have not heard my involved the Go and Roku.
So in Roku. Okay.
Those are the two that I would love to see more.
Take a peek at some of them going on. Well, I can't promise that we'll do an extensive coverage of all of these katas.
The list is up to 9.
We have a lot of katas for just a few days. That's right. But I'll try to get on
Did
everything I can.
Ichi and Lee come before San?
No, we would think so. We would think that the numerical thing would have to do with linearity and time. That does not appear to be so. What was called San kata later, probably at the time that they started saying, we're going to use kata and talk about promotions above Shodan with it, I think that's where you started seeing the numbers and calling them by this, that, and the other number. I think before that, higher kata was just higher kata. And it was when Tomiki talked about the koru kata, he meant san kata. And that was the first one that was created. It was his own work of art.
He was using kata in singular whenever he was speaking that way.
Mhm. And then later, you had these other sets. I strongly suspect that he was very intimate with Yang kata as well. But the only one that has his stamp of it, that was his own business, for sure, was san kata. And so there are elements, you look into roku kata and you see techniques that were like his favorite stuff. So he was definitely having input in them, but they weren't his own fabrications.
What's the integration between Doshi Jiu-Jitsu and its time development versus Tomiki's Aikido? How did the
Yeah, so Dojo Jiu-Jitsu comes about in the early 50s, and so it's happening at a time that's very similar to the evolution of the beginning of Judo Taiso and the beginning of Aikido in the Koshiki framework. It would have to be considered an early artifact alongside stuff like Windsong. So if you put it in a linear sense of time, that's happening early on in the whole game. And it was formulated specifically for the judo curriculum. The judo had this self-defense kata called Kinya no Kata, and it had been come to consider to be old-fashioned, that there was a lot of techniques in it that were designed around self-defense, but from the 1800s or earlier. And they felt like they needed, because judo was going into modernity and it was spreading around the world, and it had to do with boxers and karate people and all these other things that were happening. They wanted something that would be more applicable to the modern world. And I think they did a pretty good job until they got to the gun part. Before we go, I want to talk briefly about Koshiki no Kata and why I would bother to expose you all to this arcane bit. Literally, it is the koru kata that is perhaps most formulated, legitimately called a koru. We use the term koru katas for the higher katas, meaning the old antique stuff, but the term applied to koru jujitsu, and in this case it's applied to kito-ru jujitsu, is most applicable in terms of the actual use of the term koru, because that's how the Japanese themselves largely would point at it and say, oh, those are the ancient forms of jujitsu. And kito-ru, along with daito-ru, are the two foundational elements of what came together to become Tomiki, or Tomiki Aikido, or Tomiki's Randori Aikido, or however you want to phrase it. That when Miyake was describing in 97, on that B over there, that's exactly what she put. She said Daito-ru Aikido, which is kind of odd. Mostly it would be Daito-ru Aikido-jitsu, but she wrote that into it. And Kito-ru Jujitsu, as contained in the Koshiki no Kata, come together and form the Tomiki form of Aikido. So it's a form that is actively going towards this fusion of ideas. And it explains a lot of what makes our Aikido distinct from most of the Aikido in the world. So if you look around at a lot of Aikido, there's a tendency to look at it and go, well, that's wrong. Well, that's wrong too. Why don't they do? They're not at it. What's wrong with these people? It's very easy to get pretty critical of a lot of Aikido that you see demonstrated out, because we're seeing actually a different sub-variant of where we're coming from. Our Aikido is distinctive in a number of ways. For instance, footwork. We're very foot-oriented. We get our feet moving all the time. Everything's azumi because of that. Azumi meaning that we're moving our whole body through space to execute techniques. We're grappling-oriented Aikido, and that's very distinct, because there's a whole bunch of Aikido out there that is striking-oriented, and it's really about sort of punch-kicky stuff, and it's grappling around the edges, but it's mostly focused on a combative idea of being attacked with knives and swords and fists and stuff like that. Our Aikido is far more oriented around grappling oriented like It's Kazushi oriented. In other words, we explicitly talk about balance breaking and have this understanding of balance breaking, which is easy to say, well, that comes from the judo background. But really, that comes from the Hitoru background, because that's where judo got it. And so it's a step up there. And there's a whole lot of the Aikido world that will talk about arimi and tenkan and all these different ways of exploiting other people, but they don't explicitly describe it as Kazushi. They describe it as leading or getting someone in control or forming this relationship with the person. And it's all cool, but it's not just Kazushi. It's not as tight an idea, I think, as what we think about it as. Randori. Most of the Aikido world is thinking Randori in terms of multiple attacks. Our sense of Randori, or Koshu Randori, comes from Judo, which comes from the Randori that came out of Hitoru. So Judo adopted a Randori form of get a hold of each other, and they're both going after each other, knocking each other down, trying to steal one another's balance, trying to move with the other person. Had a whole lot to do with sensitivity, had a whole lot to do with exploiting off balance. And that became our ideas of Randori. That comes out of Hitoru. It's very distinct from the rest of the Randori that's out there, which is more like people just running at you. That which has its own efficacy. It's interesting stuff. It is also chaos. I can't say that it's not Randori. Definitely a Randori-oriented thing when you get multiple people flying at you. But it is emphasizing a different set of issues. That one other skilled person who's trying to take you apart while you're trying to take them apart, it's actually more complex than if you just have people attacking you with committed attacks. Because once you start entering into this semi-competitive mode with it, if you've ever done much hand-on learning, it starts to get really complex really fast. Because they know what the hell you're trying to do. And they're busy not letting you do that while they do it to you. And it's not, it doesn't come off nearly as simple or easy as what we find when we have a defined role of attacker-defender. As soon as we enter into that sort of Kata-esque world of attacker-defender, we're living in a model which simplifies and takes a lot of the chaos out, by definition. For one thing, we're starting to step away from just the reactive thing. Right? We're getting a sense of initiative that's happening on the spot. We're getting a sense of initiative that's happening before the attack's coming sometimes. So initiative, just think about it before, during, and after. And when we're doing kata, it's almost always after. Because even if you're attacking before, it's all predetermined. You know what's about to happen. There's no surprise built into it. Randori still has surprise. Randori still forces you to sharpen your edge in terms of initiative, to be thinking about being on the spot at the time that it's happening. A surprise attack is occurring, you're either before it, you're during it, you're after it. Kata, in a sense, you're always after it, because it's just never a surprise, given that you've learned your kata. The first little element I'd like to expose you to, happening when we're doing this first technique. He's pulling on me, and as he pulls on me, he opens his hip. He would be doing hip throw. Yeah, put me up in the air like that. As he starts to exhibit force on me, I move with him. I go directly in the line of his pull. His hip is opening. As his hip opens, I pull. At the same time, I'm establishing a little contact, high and low, sort of down toward the base of the spine, but around the belt line. This hand. The other hand's touching him with the shoulder. His trapezius face, trapezius head. Kata says shoulder. Just watch this little piece. Okay. We'll deal with the throw in a second, but just try that little piece first. Have them come and get a hold of your center, or get a hold of you somewhere. They're beginning to pull you, and you would go off bounds if you just stood there. Instead, we move into their hip, control their hip and their shoulder, okay? Just stop with that. So try that. Try just that. Cool. Thank you, Andre. That question over here is kind of interesting. What's going on in this attack? if you just took your palms and placed them on Andre and picked your foot up in front of him, people interpret this as momentum swinging backward for him. But open the hip, open this hip. If I do nothing but swing this up and open that hip out, his body goes for a ride in front of me like that. If I interrupt that ride with your hip per se, then I'm killing him to death. So on guard, you snuck up on him, grab him, throw him to the ground, and beat him to death, or stick him with my knife. Right? So it's opening the hip, boom, that causes him to go on this forward vaulting run. You will see forms of it if you look. There used to be no video on YouTube showing Koshiki and Kata. Now there's a bunch, but people talk about how, boom, and this is really falling back to them. Or you even see versions of it with the other leg. You see versions that are like, kick the leg up and then jerking in this way.
That really makes it bad when I do like that.
That it makes it easier on the floor. So
Miyaki wanted,
the opening hip. Yeah.
and then the step ends up behind you.
Yeah, he's gonna
Okay.
follow that. Whew, that line is cool. Okay, go ahead. All right. Technique come on us, so come up here one at a time and get me by the belly and do the attack. Okay, just do 2 steps. It can be 2 or 5 or 100 or whatever steps. Just want to feel the control position a little bit. This high-low control, also pretty distinctive in this Kito stuff. Daikodo is more one-hand control, or one point of control. This is 2 points. 2 points is that? Oh! Yeah, that's okay. That's true. Good, yeah. Just feel it. Don't drop John because he has blood thinners in him. And we don't
Oh, it's awesome. I'll
grab him.
I'll pop like a balloon.
Okay, great. Okay. Don't pop him like a water balloon. Now, if you start to bleed effusively or something, what signs are we looking for? Stain. Stain. Blood there.
Starts to pool out from you.
John looks funny. Blood coming.
I was thinking like Ebola, but
Yeah, cool. All right, so what this reminds me of is back in the day, it was probably about a Nidan judo, or maybe something. But I was already pretty good with Aikido, but my judo was still pretty primitive. There was a fellow came in one day named Dana Dune came in. He was invited by this guy who was doing judo with us at the time, Dustin Keener. And Dana, Dustin was a bodybuilder, and he looked like a Greek guy, man. He had the pecs and you know, he looked cool. But like a lot of bodybuilders, he was not particularly endurance strong. He was not particularly strong outside of ranges of motion that had to do with his weightlifting routine. He was generally in shape, but he wasn't built out of the same stuff as most judo people are. And so it didn't have quite the same qualities. He invited his buddy Dana in. Dana was a pro wrestler power lifter guy and held the bench press championship of the state and was built about as tall as Andre and maybe wider than me in all dimensions. So you looked at him and he was this wide, and then he turned sideways and he was this wide. And he turned back to face you and he's this wide. And he's about this big. And I looked at that and went, oh, I'll work over here with the green belts and the white belts. You deal with him, Dustin, you brought him in. So Dustin played with him for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. And Dana had just come back from the Olympic training camp in Colorado Springs for judo. heavily into judo, heavily into pro wrestling, went over to Japan, did pro wrestling there, came back, judo. And it's just built like this giant, massive fire plug of muscle. And at the time, I still really fancied doing shoulder throw as my big throw. I was pretty good with my feet by this time. I had some foot sweeps working already. But Dustin comes up and says, well, sorry, Nick, I just can't do it. I can't take him. He's wearing me out. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay. So I said, okay, Dana, let's play. And we danced a little bit, and Dana impresses me very quickly with his overwhelming power. Whoa, this is something. And I'm very impressed by the fact that I haul off to do my big throw to him. Well, first I just smoke him with foot sweep. Okay, I know my feet work. Knock him down at will, that's good. I feel more comfortable. But then, I said, well, I'll just try my shoulder throw. And I try my shoulder throw, and I move maybe 2 inches. And it's like pulling that wall down. It's like you just grab a fence post or a side of a building, and I hit this thing, and it was like, boom! I went, oh, that's not too cool. I don't have any big slam dunk. I pull on it, and it might as well be rooted to the center of the earth. That's going nowhere fast. And so we continue to move. And then he hauls off to try to get me. And I go for this wild ass ride through the air. I said, woo, I don't want to do that anymore. And I smoked him down with another foot sweep. And the next time he goes to pull, in this massive, giant, arcing surikomi action, which is an action that looks like this. That. I turn loose and ride it. I just let my feet go. I feel this big pull start. His center's dropped and he's pulling like a madman. And I just walk around like Shiver's Plum Fairy dancing around between his arms. And he pulls like a madman. And I fly around the outside of his arms and go all the way to the end. And then just a little pass. And that just a little pass is just enough for him to go, oh, and fall on his ass. And then I sit on his chest. And he's deaf, so he can't hear you, so you got to speak right to his face. And some brilliant part of me said, no, Dana. If you pull and be so violent and fast, nobody will want to play with you. You'll scare everyone. Oh, okay. So if you throw me slow and light, I'll fall all day. But if you try to pull like that and scare me, you won't throw me at all today. Oh, okay. And he gets up and he does a nice light one. And I go up in the air and then I knock him down with a couple more foot switches. And then he does another nice light one. And same game. Then he gets excitable again. I don't know. He just decides he wants to feel what he felt the first time. Like a madman again. And again, what I was thinking in my mind, I'm just doing Aikido to him. I'm just going with his power. But what I was really doing is the principle of Ju. What I was really doing is this very first technique coming out of Kito-Ru. That when the power is acting on you, that if I stand here and resist Andre, I'm just the warrior in his armor, right? And I go, wow, I go for that damn ride right there. But when this overwhelming power comes against me, I just walk with it. I outwalk it. I turn loose of my determining where my center is going to be, and I let him do all the pulling. And when he takes it for the ride, I just go out to the end of it, wherever the end is. In this case, we're making the end a little quicker because we're also stimulating his spine. I wasn't doing that to Dana. I just let his own pull die at the end. And then I just went kick past it. And I sat on his chest maybe 5 times in the course of that whole engagement. He never threw me again with a big throw. Because every time he'd get powerful, I was like he would pull on me like I was a solid thing, and I would turn into a liquid thing. and that liquid thing would go flying out of the end of his arms, and then his action would stop, because to be that strong, it had a limited space that it could function in, right? And it would hit the end of his power curve, and then that water would just go another little bit. And I wouldn't throw on him, he was just collapsing, because he would hit the end of the curve and then just find that there was no stability there. That really reminds me of this first action, that first thing. So it could be anything. You could have a partner coming and pulling on you any way they can imagine. He's just going to pull me. And you just walk over there with him. And it can come as a surprise. It can be pulling me from somewhere, I don't know where he's at. And you just go with him. And that looks like pretty basic Aikido 101 to us. You go with the power that's being exhibited on you. We all learn that in our work. If they're going to be so dumb as to just push or pull you violently, we do what? Move with largely, right?
With plus just a smidge.
Plus just a smidge. Principle of juice. Principle coming out of Kito
Symmetric.
Jujitsu. That's right. Now the next little, so any questions about that? You want to just practice some pulls on each other?
Sure.
Just to kind of do some random pulls and just see if you can turn your center loose to go in whatever direction. And we're interested at this point that if I'm going to just grab old Andre and pull him, that the center just immediately goes with that pull. And now I'm not doing pushing so much. When I pull him here, and yeah, you just join centers, comes with it. Right? No big thing. And we're interested in the feet moving. And for now, also what's interesting in this kata, when he does the kata thing to me, watch my feet a second. Not only do they move in sugiyaki. They move in this galloping horse thing, right? Where you're going down and up, down and up. If he pulls me and I walk in the regular Ayumiyashi thing, boom, 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 yeah, he throws me again. See that? Ah. So there's secret stuff that when you go flying off with the lead foot the whole time. Whatever he's pulling on, that foot becomes the leader. The other one becomes the follower. What does that do for us? It does the fact that we're going down and up instead of popping up over the hill on each step. Everybody understand rise and fall with the step? Okay, so try it. Sugiyaki, off to the races, whatever direction. Cool. Did everybody feel how Sugiyaki kind of smokes them if you just turn loose? Anybody not feel it? Or not get it to work?
We found out that if you try to Yumiyashi in the wrong place, he's got you again right away.
That's right. It goes through a cycle. A Yumiyashi, when we use that term, it has to do with walking like this. That's what a Yumiyashi means. Sugiyaki means this. And there's probably better pronunciation of different people call it Sugiyashi. Or some wonderful Japanese sounding very loudly. But yeah, it's the following foot. A Yumiyashi has this quality that my body's down now. My feet are apart. We're in drop. And to go to the next step, I have to go through this rise. Now I'm in body rise as my feet come together, and now the foot comes down. All right? So to go forward, I got this up on the hilltop, down in the valley. Up on the hilltop, down in the valley. Sugiyaki starts, again, I'm down, and I go down more. And then I just slide the back foot up. So I'm making an arc that's going like this. Boom, down, up, down, up, down, up. Whereas a Yumiyashi said, I'm going up, then down, up, then down, up, then down. And the up on this is about equivalent to the down of this, right? So one is pronouncedly arcing over the top and raising my center of gravity an extra inch or two. Whereas the other is dropping the center of gravity and coming back to that low point that we started at. Dropping it, coming back to that low point, and I never go up in the upward range as much. Cool? So you have this scooping down view. And that's Sugiyaki. So that's like a cool secret weapon. They start to pull you, they start to exhibit a lot of power on you, they're overwhelming, you've got a Dana Doom King monster that's just gonna jerk you out of your socks. Turn loose and just become Zorro. You just finishing through, you're moving with that Sugiyashi step. And you're just coming up to tickle your spine. And like magic, your spine runs out of space in a short period. The next piece of this deal is really tricky. And it's the way this thing is thrown. It's kind of the center of what we're talking about. He pulls on my ass. And I go for this ride. Boom, boom, boom. We get to the execution, and we have lots of ways to execute, right? But this is a three-part gizmo. I want you to watch all three parts. That's part one. Throws him over there. There's part 1 and 2. 1, 2. Throws him back over there and back there. All right, so 2 things. The third part is where we really, and any of the 1, 2, or 3 might kill him, but you put them all together and it's really difficult for the guy. So we got him here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, and it spins him as it shoves him back there. So what we're doing is a square, like a 90-degree line. I got this beauty here. I made this the other day for this occasion. I take these things together for the visually. So we're like moving through space. This first action that we make, I'm taking my right knee and putting it behind my left. Boom. And I'm defining this dimension, horizontal line. I'm not doing as big as this. I'm doing fairly short. But everything's going laterally through him. I'm taking him off that way. Cool. Then, the next thing my body does is drop straight back. The same foot that just moved in goes back. Okay. Right on your own. Your right knee goes behind your left and immediately back. Okay. In, back. So when we go in, it's like we're stepping onto a tightrope. Our center's going laterally, and like we're stepping into a tightrope position. That's right. The next thing is to take this 90-degree turn that I was just stepping backwards and go down, so that we're not just going backward, we're going in this angle downward. So 90 degrees, but now 90 degrees with this dropping function at the same time. Cool. And then put that together. Stand here with the guy. This comes in back here. Goes down. What does that change? Which is a weird, like, turning forward. And you can follow where you like. I'm not worried. The Kata that says, open this knee and close it back up, because if you have to open the knee, you just went sideways and down. And you're still on a tightrope here. The knee opens. The knee opens, you regain your stability, and you come back up. Cool? So try those 3 elements. Yeah.
When do you put that knee out?
At the very end.
At the very end, okay.
So I got the guy, comes in, do it back and down, and open. Okay. And come back. Stand back up. Cool? So, and just try the pieces. First we're going into that. And look how we displace it. Then we're going to go in and back. And look, he goes way back there. Then we go in, back, down. And try to do it with as little arms as you can. I'm still leaving my arm out a little bit. But basically, you want to get it so you displace it pretty much with just very light contact. Cool? So try all 3 elements, and then you go forward with them. Cool.
Hey, John, you ready to feel that?
Cool. All right. One place this shows up when you're Aikido, or can show up if you like for it, if you're ongoing your Aikido, is how many times have we done Gaiden Nachi? No, I'm doing Gaiden Nachi. And get here and take my big foot. That's right. Right? Very common. Gaiden Nachi position. What moves next? Will be my right foot. And then ball came off, correct? Right. One of that. But how often do we get there? Boom, and I just put my damn foot down. My weight's already down and he's not vaulted. Right? Now what has to move next is my left foot. So I have choices with that left foot. I can scooch it up and then take another big step with the right foot, which is what we're trying to do. Boom! 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 Yeah. And you can fade out and you go to next foot. But another option we have, using the Dojo idea, is that my weight just comes down on my right foot, and left foot slides in front. And I sit over here. Yeah, whole different feet. Whole different feet. So I advise you to try this with getting up to good cross-body position here. And we know that we can pick our right foot up and launch him off into space. But our right foot's just hit the ground, and he's not gone. So now take our left foot back behind. Back in. Cool. Same basic deal, just from a typical ideal scenario. Hey, side out. Side out. Okay, question. Jack's got great center. Jack's got great center. And the center is ready to push in the center, but which direction is Jack going? Going lateral. So his pushing surface then becomes what? The side of his body.
Yes.
Is the arm serving him in perfect center over here? No. Why not? Because his center is falling in this direction. So when you fall in this direction, Jack, this is new center. Yeah. When you're falling forward, that's center. Falling sideways, that's center. That makes sense? Okay. So when you start pushing out in front of you, but then stepping sideways, it pushes against this weak structure. Let it open, yeah. Now, step into that push. Woo. Cool. Cool.
That still works without the arm.
What's that?
That stays in unless you do a game knock.
Well, you are centered in game knocking.
It's against the rules until you're in Edom.
You're
Then the
staying
rules are not the
centered.
rules.
Because that's where your center's going. If your center's going back there, your unbendable arm is going to get behind your ass somewhere.
This is a construct to teach you that this is damned important.
Right. But it assumes you're going
But it assumes you're going this way. Because frankly, if I'm a brand new student, going this way is real common. You real like, but at some point, we have to be able to go this way. We have to be able to go this way. We have to be able to go this
Right.
way.
Exactly. And so
And
you
you
got
got
a
to
center
feel
of wherever
players
you're
for a
going.
while. You get this behavior of there's some amazing center concept going on. But they are, because there's a pushing surface
That's right.
somewhere happening. But it ain't always right there.
That's true. It's here as we learn it so that we understand the concept of center. But then you apply it wherever you're going. So when I'm going sideways through Jack, pushing here is meaningless. Pushing here is kind of useless. Right? So if your hand can track the center in whatever direction you happen to be going. It's just that when you're working cut onto somebody, it's all right here because we're dealing with one another right here. But when you wind up sideways with them, like he got you in a headlock, or he's grappling with you, all these sideways terrible things like this, that the center is right going through him. It's not out there in front of me anymore. The center of gravity is still right here, but I don't want to move it right there. I want to move it through him. So that becomes the operative line. Go again.
This still works, right? Even without the arm.
With no arm at all, you can still see this happen. Because at my center can displace his center this way, then it can, I just have enough contact with him. In, down, and back. And we get in, back down. I have a little contact at the side of the body, my arm, but it's not reaching out and grabbing or pushing or pulling.
Isn't the main emphasis is that your center is maintaining constant contact?
What's
That's
doing
what
the
they
job
go
is
back to.
subsuming, and it's doing it with the whole body movement to make that whole construct that pops him out sideways and then dumps him back. The arms are just there to transmit that energy, basically. So we want to avoid Stuff where we're, yeah, fine. Stuff where we're pushing the shoulder blades, or pulling and pushing the upper body with this particular. Cool? Now there's a whole range at which you can use this thing. It's kind of neat. So if I'm, come on, Andre. We find in the kata there are forms of this where I attack him and he blocks this attack, and then he wraps around to do a hip throw again. The hip throw is very popular in this time. Uke likes to grab you and try to just dump you on the ground with a hip throw. Happens over and over again. So he blocked the thing, and he reaches around him at hip throw position. Oh! And he's basically, we're replicating somebody grabbing with it and kind of did a headlock or hostage to the ground and just wrap themselves around you. Think of it just like, you're just wrestling pets. Right? And what the kata describes is a range. The first part of the range is the forehead, right here. And then it describes ranges further down, where you're compressing the center here, like this, down around the hip, and you just kind of reach to the opposite thigh. And they don't go this far, but the range also extends all the way down into these ankles. At the top end, you don't want to go past the line of the eye sockets, basically, because the head gets smooth and it starts sliding off up here. You start glancing off these foam dome things like I've got, right? So if he trains to put his hand up high and push hard, he gets this a lot. Right? If he trains to get it right in the eye sockets, it's still the flattish part of the face configuration, and he stands a much higher chance of being able to deliver a line of force to there without it sliding. All right, even if I turn my head, he can stay in that groove pretty well. But once he starts coming up on the rounded surface of the frontal bone up here, all kinds of slippy stuff become more probable. Okay? So the range at the top is just below the forehead into the eyes. The nose is cool. The chin is cool. The line of the shoulders is cool. When we get down around the heart or into the sternum, you can start thinking about compressing into them, causing this back to arch. Not arch, what is it? Yeah, bow. Boom. Put that bowing function right there. Once you get a little deeper, as if you're reaching across the hip and that bowing is still happening in the solar plexus here with my elbow. You get a little deeper yet here. All the way down this ankle. Cool. So the function of where you can apply this little gizmo of slipping in, back, and down is demonstrated all along that set of conditions. So you kind of want to just take your partner, set it up from Yakigaki Gomeate position, not at the forehead, but at the eyes, and then just incrementally go down further and further and further and further, and apply it all the way down to the ground. Cool? Cool. Okay, so let's try that then. Thank you.
But your average idiot is going to do
Right. So when we think about these movements in the 17 or 23, however we consider it, think about Yakigami and the Eidai. We have these positions of placing it on, or push, or whatever. But you can also think of these as reaching. So we think of Eidai as push. Right? It's hot. It's all about pushing. It's very pushy. But Aikido can also be rapid. That's a rapid Yakigami. Right, like this. Right. You can wrap around the body instead of pushing through the line to the Eidai. I reach over here like I'm in this pocket in the center compresses right along the right solar plexus and diaphragm. And it's actually a lot less work. People have said, oh, you're pushing down. I'm not pushing down. I'm reaching through, and the thing that's affecting you is at the tricep and elbow area. It's almost like doing a little compression elbow at the center. Hey, can we see that like 15 more times? Sure. Okay.
One is enough.
One is enough. Okay. So you're actually compressing them down and in as you reach over here. This is not doing much to the center. This, yeah, you can feel it. It's happening right in here. Yeah, there you go. So we don't want to neglect gizmos, that's right. When Mr. Koshiki described Gegnate in the very first form of it I can find historically digging it up, Gegnate wasn't called Gegnate. It was called elbow latte. Hitting him with the elbow. That's, yeah. Boom. That has disappeared in our later iterations of the kata. And there's all this elegant pushing across everything, which is nice, it's good stuff. But we've kind of lost this little, that little element to it. So, this is just a form of recovery, that piece of disappeared stuff. Another place the same structure comes into play. You see it in, he's reaching for me, and we're going to feel him through and bring him all the way to here. And then from here we do an interesting thing. I don't do the knees together thing. I do the kneel and turn 90 degrees. And so I've taken out the extra body rise by scooching my knees together. And I've replaced it with Veruma. Okay. And twisting his body into his throat. And my own body turns with it as well. So we're doing the Shirawate. Think about the Shirawate here. This element's kind of cool too. You'll find in Randori if you haven't already. Once you get behind your elbow with your hand high, like they're waving, and you get to this one, you get to boss a lot. There's not much. So this by itself is a cool thing to learn. You might want to take a rep or two. He's reaching for you. Pass it off, control the elbow, slip behind. So that you can just stand here and wave. I think it's a great thing to learn all by itself for that hand change. Quality that's going on there, hand in hand, elbow control, just above the elbow. Here. But in terms of this kneeling and turning thing, this type of throw that happens in Koshiki, from behind you, facing that way, I'm turning what, 90 degrees again, and kneeling. And so we're getting the same kind of dropping function. You can apply that in any of your Shirlates. Just come in and just Shirlate. Okay. Just kneel over there. Cool. Sure. And that's really great if you have, again, this kata is designed around armor. You're not going to find many people wearing armor unless you go to SCA events or the Ren fairs or something.
Or you're fighting riot police.
Or riot police, or yeah, you're occupied, you're fighting riot police. Or you're out there with the Kendo guys and they're all in their armor, you know. Pretty rare. But you do find these bulldog people built like Banadun King. And I run into one. There was a guy in Colorado. And I was thinking about moving to Colorado at one time. And I'd get here and get on his shoulders, and he would kind of lean in and buck forward like he's going to plow a field. And his belt more like Bruce. Do a Shirate. And I got here, and it's like, he's just going to go forward and plow a field. There's no damn way I'm going to cause this spine to arch and go back. It just ain't happening. But oddly enough, that still happens. If I get into it, he gets into a fight with me, pulling me straight back, or locking my shoulders, and trying to, yeah, keep my shoulders. At least, this kind of damn fight. Can't do it for me, I can't. Well, that's kind of the armor thing, you know? That's a modern form. I mean, I'm just being the defensive guy in armor. I'm not going to let you beat me. And it's really a kata that addresses that just as much as it addresses people actually wearing physical armor. Because I'm dedicated to the prospect of not going down. And then he turns 90 degrees and kneels over here. Or there, whichever way you want to go. And I said, fuck. That ain't the vector I'm pulling in. Right? So it's telling us something about the delivery of energy in a Shirawate, which is saying it's mostly one-handed. And it's mostly on a turn. That you can sure do it going straight back, and people do. And we have forms of it, like in the Big Ten where we do. But in Randori particularly, you wind up behind people on their shoulders, thinking, and you run into that damn guy in armor. You say, well, shit, my Shirawate ain't working. And the temptation there is to get in a fight, is to make that work in that particular line. And what Koshiki no Kata and Kito are saying is, try 90 degrees to that line and add a little body top. And when you go 90 degrees, you will create Karuma. Their body will have to reorient. As it's reorienting, it's very vulnerable to drop. And why is that? Because every time the body turns in normal movement, it does what?
Goes down.
It goes up. When we turn around in normal movement, when you do the big push and turn in the walk, or you do all the turnaround functions, normal turnaround, and you're turning around in your normal upper body movement, turning around, walking in the world, your body goes up. The only time it goes down is when we do hip switch. If you open with your hip and go down, you can go down in a turn. Yeah, you can drop into a turn, but it's a hip-oriented turn. When you do a foot-oriented turn, yeah, everything goes up in the air first.
Unlike smoke, it goes up.
Yeah. So most turning action indicates body rise. There are some that don't, but most do. So we're causing that turn by turning 90 degrees. When we turn 90 degrees, we're hooked to him. What's he got to do? He's got to turn at least 90 degrees as well. That creates the body rise that we had when we were stepping sideways. It's just now we're creating an upward turning. And then we do the drop move. It's just functionally the same thing. It's oriented around creating a rise. It's slightly different. And this goes to what Kito means. Kito means rise, fall. Rise, fall. And we think about rise, fall as our feet coming together, rise, our feet coming apart, fall. But body turning is rise. Hips turning is fall. So body turning is rise. Cool? So this is a body turn form of Shiraka. Try that for a few times.
See, you showed that moving again was really.
Sure. If I wrap the guy up and I'm in a Shiraka position.
Yes.
I'm going to play off of my right hand in this case. I'm going to turn 90 degrees.
Okay.
Boom.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's not a goblet step.
Yeah,
At all.
it's
That was a mistake I made.
yeah, if I'm on this line, my feet are on this line, when I turn 90 degrees, I'm still on that line. Yeah, Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm going straight down in that square line, 90 degree turn.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I swoop, it's going to be different. If I were to do something like swoop over and then down, it's going to be very different. Might still work, but it's not quite the same deal. Boom, boom. It's a very distinctive feeling. Cool.
Thing is, it's this left side foot that goes down, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Left foot over
it's-
there.
Just be that foot?
Yes,
Mhm.
which is interestingly different from how I think to do it. I think to do it as a goblet step.
Right,
Like this.
yeah, that's right.
But it's just,
The left foot. Oh, yeah, that's better.
Cool.
That was easy to figure out.
Try with the partner. Come around. Sure on. How we apply these things in the car?
turn up, those are all the sort of, this
Yeah.
kind of movements.
I think so. There's
The high
six
one,
of
the
them.
low one, and the turning one.
Right, okay. There's six of them, yeah. And there's some that are repeating at the same time. And so in all the various, we have higher ones and lower ones. We have turning form. We have the forms that you step in.
Now, are these the armored kata? Is that Yan kata?
No, this is called Koshiki no Kata.
Just in case George asks, so I don't know what it is.
This is Koshiki no Kata from
Okay.
Kito-ryu Jiu-Jitsu. It's preserved in the Kodokan. This was taught to me in 1997 by Ms. Miyake, and then and a few others. And then it was requested not to be taught and disseminated at that point, except for very, very high-level people. So anything that you decide should be kept that way in secret basically disappears. Because you just wind up not having all the people that are interested in it. So yeah, until this past year, I had just let it stay in storage mostly. There was a period for about a year where we looked at it more intently, and then it kind of just faded away as things will when they're big secrets.
Secret
It's
society.
a hazard of martial arts. You have all this secrecy. It's like, oh, we should keep this a secret or whatever. Because we don't want our enemies to know it, or that's the rationale of the code. Is you have all these secrets and you sign in blood that you're never going to reveal, blah, blah, blah. Because you don't want the other clan to know what the tricks are that you're going to pull on when you get out there and it's, the nut cutting. You want them to be surprised. So it's sort of a secret tactic thing. The thinking of. The downside is that anytime you make information secret, it becomes very limited. It sort of turns into dead ends, and it's hard to preserve it over time.
Like a dead language.
But yeah, if you make it a secret between 10 guys and then 9 of them die, like the ninjas had happened, then what's going to happen? Yeah, the one guy, he has the super. Well, that's exactly what happened to him. But you know, if he fell over dead, too, poof,
It's gone.
it's gone. It's all gone. So if you want the information to transfer over time, a long time, yeah, you teach it to everybody, so everybody knows the ABC song. ABC. But if that was a secret song, you know, our language would be very different today.
You'd be able to get to Z without singing.
Right. How the hell do we get to Z without singing? That's right. We can all do Z.
Z, the ABC without singing.
What happened after C? Wasn't it? Gamma. I always get lost in the elementals somewhere in there. But right, the knowledge becomes ubiquitous, gets spread out in culture. Hard to kill it, hard to get rid of it. It becomes like a meme, has a life of its own. But you start making secrets out of it, and it starts to die from within. And you have to do active things to try to keep it. You're always resuscitating the damn thing. It's always on the verge of, so it's last gas, so we have to beat some life back into it. And you see this again and again in the code of arts, where they start dying off. We've been on the verge of, we're about to lose this precious last guy teaching the last bit of this last thing. And it's happened hundreds of times over the past couple of years. And it keeps happening today. We're still in the same mindset, even though they're not in a warring clan thing anymore, and they're not looking at it. But they're still basically doing the traditional thing. And the traditional thing is to keep it a secret. But this was one of those things. Treated that way. Keep this a secret. This is
Particularly sanctified.
yeah. The oral.
The blood oath sign.
So anyway, you'll still run into that. You find people who are still doing that same basic song and dance today. And you really find people like when you put everything on the internet. What are they doing? Too bad for them. Any questions? Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the second half, the order was.
The order was that when we were doing it, the Kata together, the first section were like this, and everything stopped and go. I come up and then I attack him, and he does the thing to me and knocks me down. And we get up real gently and we come back together and had that kind of look to it. The last 7 techniques was sort of bam, 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 back and forth. That's the order was. That is a set that came along probably 100 or 200 years after the original set was built. Wow. It was a few generations later that some bright fellow went, hey, you know what we could do with this? We could do it like we're not in armor. And we could do this with it. And he built this whole set, sort of. And it was a set of 7 techniques that commented on the first 14 techniques, basically. The first 14 techniques are all done in pairs. So there's 7 pairs. He built 7 techniques to complement the first 7 pairs, but with a completely different dynamic. Okay. A different dynamic. And it includes a lot of falling. Wasn't, but instead of falling away, we're going to talk about falling away tomorrow. The Urawaza talks about falling and going at them. So it has a different falling.
So how many techniques are there altogether in Koshiki?
21.
Okay. Okay.
And this will be on the internet.
What's that?
You'll put on YouTube.
I will look at what we got and I'll figure out if this, what we do here, it doesn't sound good or doesn't look, we can't see much of it or whatever, I'll try to film segments and put it out segmentally.
Am I correct in that the second set or the last third is not assuming the collar? You had said at one point that it was assuming a minimal outer amount.
We're in underwear.
Right. Okay.
We're in our underwear. We're not in our armor.
We're not in our armor explicitly.
There
But we're
is-
not necessarily in a judo view either.
There is some form of clothing because some of the grips that happen are
Okay.
like this. But you could grab them in a t-shirt and do it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what they do. If you still grab their body, it would just hurt. I'm grabbing by his pecs and pull his armpit hairs out. That'll happen.
Grab the nipple.
Grab that, hey, grab the nipples. Whee! There you go. So there are, you can still grappling kata,
Right.
and it still works with grappling with uniform stuff, but the armor idea and the slowness and the methodical technique of the armor is gone. And now it's a much more dynamic on the fly.
When I was watching it on YouTube earlier this week, I took that last part as a single string like the Joe katas. The last couple of Joe katas go boom.
Yeah.
I took the last part as one single
One
exercise,
waza.
as one waza.
Well, it is one set.
Right.
And it is a continuous.
Okay.
Well, cool. It's break time. We've got a nice long lunch break. We come back at 3. Since we don't have a noon class today, it's Wednesday, right? So I know you're going to go to Century and other people go out and eat. I need to call my wife and say hello. Then go out and have a bite to eat somewhere. Have food together. Thank you very much.